In the heart of a quiet valley stood a town that seemed untouched by time. Streets were lined with lanterns, children played freely in front yards, and neighbors left their doors unlocked without fear. To outsiders, this place was a picture of safety and innocence. Yet, beneath the calm rhythm of daily life, something sinister was silently taking shape. At the center of it all was a couple admired by many, a man known for his charm and a woman praised for her grace. Together, they looked like the embodiment of love and stability. People envied their unity, never suspecting the cracks hidden behind closed doors. But on one fateful night, this town's fragile peace would shatter forever. The betrayal that unfolded inside one home was so dark, so violent, that it left every resident whispering the same chilling question: how well do we ever know the ones we love? At first glance, their marriage was the kind people dreamed of. He was a respected figure in town, always quick with a smile, while she embodied elegance and devotion. Together, they seemed unshakable, two halves of a perfect whole. Friends called them the golden couple, and neighbors often remarked how lucky they were to have found each other. But perfection has a way of cracking in silence. Behind the cheerful greetings and polite dinners, small fractures began to form. The man spent longer nights away, his explanations vague and hurried. She noticed his phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, was now guarded like a vault. The woman, though praised for her serenity, often stared into the distance with a troubled look, as if wrestling with unspoken doubts. Rumors began to stir, subtle at first. A whispered conversation in the marketplace, a fleeting glance caught by observant neighbors. Some claimed they had seen him with another woman, someone younger, mysterious, always careful not to be noticed. Others dismissed it as idle gossip, unwilling to believe betrayal could lurk in such a cherished marriage. Inside their home, the tension was unmistakable. Conversations grew shorter, dinners colder, silence heavier. She asked questions he refused to answer. He gave reassurances that sounded rehearsed, hollow, and brittle. And yet, whenever they appeared in public, their masks were flawless, their smiles convincing. What no one saw were the arguments that boiled behind closed doors, words sharp enough to wound, accusations that left invisible scars. She feared she was losing him, while he feared the truth of his double life might one day surface. Every secret has a breaking point, and for this couple, that point was drawing near. The town that saw them as a symbol of stability was about to witness a truth so unsettling, it would turn admiration into horror. For in the quiet corners of their marriage, betrayal was already taking root, and soon, it would erupt into violence no one could have predicted. The night it happened was unnervingly quiet, the kind of silence that made even the ticking clock on the wall sound thunderous. The couple's home, usually lit with a warm glow, felt unusually dark, as though the walls themselves sensed what was about to unfold. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling slightly as she twisted her wedding ring round and round. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. For weeks, she had suspected. For weeks, she had gathered fragments of truth receipts hidden in his pockets. The lingering scent of unfamiliar perfume, the sudden need to work late almost every night. Tonight, she was no longer willing to pretend. The sound of the door creaking open echoed through the hallway. He entered, his footsteps heavy, his eyes avoiding hers. He looked tired, but more than that, he looked guilty. She rose slowly, her voice trembling but sharp. "Where have you been?" It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of all her suspicions. He hesitated, fumbling for words. "I told you, work. Don't lie to me." Her tone cut through the room like glass shattering. "I've seen the messages. I know about her." His face drained of color. For a moment, silence hung between them, thick and suffocating. Then came his anger, quick and defensive. "You've been spying on me? You think you know everything?" Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of weakness, they were of betrayal, of rage. "I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me?" The argument escalated, voices clashing like thunder in a storm. Words became weapons, each one striking deeper than the last. She accused, he denied, then he accused her in return, twisting the truth until it no longer resembled reality. But beneath the fury, something darker stirred within him. A cornered man, desperate to protect his secret, desperate to maintain control. His breathing grew heavier, his hands clenched into fists. The woman, noticing the change in his demeanor, stepped back cautiously, her instincts warning her that this was no longer just an argument. And then it happened. In a moment of blind rage, he reached for the kitchen knife he had left on the dresser earlier. The glint of the blade caught the dim light as he held it, his hand shaking. Her eyes widened in horror. "You wouldn't," she whispered, her voice breaking. But the man she once loved, the man the town respected, was gone, replaced by someone consumed by fear, anger, and shame. His mind clouded, his heart pounding. He stepped closer. She screamed, a sound that seemed to pierce the still night. Neighbors later admitted they thought they heard something, but no one came to check, not until it was far too late. The struggle was brief but brutal. Furniture toppled, glass shattered, her cries echoed and then fell silent. And when it was over, the once proud husband stood trembling, the knife slick with blood, staring at what he had done. The golden couple, admired by all, had been destroyed in a single night of madness. What began as whispers of betrayal had ended in a horror so profound it would scar the town forever. And as the man stood in that room, drenched in guilt, he realized the terrible truth. The mask had finally shattered, and there was no going back. The house was eerily still after the chaos. The man stood motionless, staring at his blood-stained hands, the knife lying lifeless on the floor. His chest rose and fell rapidly, each breath filled with disbelief. He had crossed the line, a line from which there was no return. He stumbled backward, his mind racing. "What have I done?" he thought, panic consuming him. But almost immediately, another thought followed. No one can know. The hours that followed were a blur. He dragged her body, wiped surfaces, tried to erase every trace of what had happened. Yet, no matter how much he cleaned, the metallic scent of blood clung to the air, and her presence, her silence haunted him. By morning, the town began to notice her absence. She was the kind of woman who was always present at the local bakery in the morning, chatting with neighbors in the afternoon, tending her garden before sunset. When she didn't show up, people asked questions. When her phone went unanswered, whispers began. The husband, however, played his role with chilling precision. He walked through town with a mask of sorrow, telling anyone who asked that she had left him. He painted himself as the abandoned man, broken and betrayed. "She couldn't forgive me," he muttered, shaking his head, eyes downcast. To outsiders, it sounded plausible, tragic even. But something didn't add up. Neighbors remembered the scream that pierced the silence that night. Some dismissed it as a nightmare, others convinced themselves it was just the sound of a TV turned too loud. But deep down, they knew. Something was wrong. Days turned into weeks. The husband began appearing with his mistress, more openly now, as though he had nothing to hide. They laughed in restaurants, held hands in public. To some, it was shocking how quickly he had moved on. To others, it was confirmation of their suspicions. The police eventually knocked on his door. Just routine questions, they said, but their eyes lingered on the faint scratches along his arm, the nervous tremor in his hands. He explained them away with ease. Work accident, he claimed. He thought he was safe. But truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface. A neighbor came forward, admitting she had seen him carrying something heavy out of the house late at night. Another swore they heard a fight, then silence, then nothing. The small cracks in his story began to widen, and soon the image of the grieving husband no longer held. One evening, as the town gathered at a cafe, news broke a body had been discovered near the outskirts, shallowly buried under layers of dirt and leaves. The whispers turned into gasps, eyes widened, hands covered mouths. The truth they had feared was finally undeniable. The town that once admired the perfect couple now recoiled in horror. Mothers pulled their children closer, elders shook their heads, and friends of the wife wept openly in disbelief. And the husband? His mask shattered completely. He was no longer the respectable man he had once been, but a monster in the eyes of everyone he had deceived. The mistress, once charmed by his promises, began to feel the weight of the truth as well. She was entangled with a murderer. The arrest came swiftly. Police cars swarmed the quiet street, red and blue lights flashing against the darkened sky. Neighbors stood outside in stunned silence as he was handcuffed and The crime had been exposed. The truth was no longer a whisper, it was a roar that shook the entire town. And as he disappeared into the back of the police car, one thought echoed in every heart that watched. Evil had been living among them, hidden behind a smile. The courtroom was filled to capacity. Journalists, neighbors, and strangers all gathered, their eyes fixed on the man who once walked proudly through their streets. Now, he sat in chains, head bowed, his face pale and expressionless. The prosecutor's voice cut through the silence, laying out every detail of his crime. The betrayal, the affair, the brutal murder, the attempt to erase her existence. Each word struck like a hammer, echoing the horror that had shaken the town. When the mistress was called to testify, the room held its breath. Her voice trembled as she admitted she never imagined their love would end in blood. She wept, but no one offered comfort. Finally, the judge delivered the sentence. Life imprisonment. Gasps filled the room, some in relief, some in outrage that death had not been chosen instead. As the gavel struck, the weight of justice fell. The man who once thought love was his excuse now faced eternity behind bars. Outside, townspeople lit candles for the woman whose life had been stolen. Her memory lived on, not as a victim, but as a warning of how love twisted by obsession can turn into pure evil. Love is supposed to protect, to heal, to bind two souls together. But in this story, love became a weapon sharpened by betrayal and driven by selfish desire. A woman lost her life, a man lost his freedom, and an entire town lost its peace. And now, I leave you with one haunting question. When love turns into obsession, is it still love or the cruelest form of evil? Share your thoughts below. Do you believe justice was truly served in this case?